This was back in high school. On our second date to the movies, she turned around and asked me a really curious question. She's like, could you shave that fucking facial hair off? Right off. And I looked at her like she was fucking out of her mind. She was a loony. I was just like, get fucked, you wanker. And she's like, oh, that's fun. That's fun. Fair dinkum, eh? So naturally, I said back to her, you can get a dog up ya. And she's like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking go. And I was just like, oh yeah, walk on, walk on. This relationship's fucking cactus, mate. And she's like, oh, I'm fucking spewing. I'm spewing. So, mate, I just went home, straight home, put on some fucking grouse tracky dacks. Can't even finish my bullshit story, I'm sorry. Yeah, I went home and put on some grouse tracky dacks. And I ate some Vegemite. Oh, fucking hell.
Spencer and Tulip were at a dance one day, and Spencer was being rude to someone she knew. She then looked at Tulip and said, yeah, I'm an a-hole. Then he replied,
Nah, you're my asshole.
Then he immediately realized how awkward that sounded and turned super red. She hugged him and told him that it was alright.
The last day of school holidays, Slapped Ham found a pretty flower that he wanted to give his crush on the first day of school. He practiced what he was going to say to her,
Out of 7 billion smiles, yours is my favorite.
then handed the flower. But when he saw her the next day, he ran up to her really excited saying,
Take the thing, take it.
She laughed when he explained what he had planned. She smiled and told him that it was beautiful, and what he actually said was funny and adorable.
Andy Mations was about 13 when her dad, his at-the-time girlfriend, and her daughter were driving around trying to decide where to eat one night. They passed a Fuddruckers that just recently opened, and Andy Mations said, "Why don't we try Breadfuckers?" She quickly went on the defensive, as it came out that way completely by accident. Her dad, however, didn't believe her, and she was grounded for a week.
While her family was in Spain for a month, Doopy was asked to watch their store, which was a key-cutting place. One day, she was working at the counter when a grumpy man with a husky came in. The dog ran to Doopy, jumping on her. She picked it up as the man walked over. The dog ran to Doopy, jumping on her. Little did she know that the dog had peed on her white denim pants. The man looked down and began to laugh, screaming, "This young lady here pissed herself!" Doopy suddenly set the dog down and looked at her pants. Still laughing, the man went outside and shouted it again, making people rush into the store to see for themselves. At that point, Doopy was beet red and sunk behind the counter. For the rest of the month, she was mocked.
When Sid was in middle school, he had a stalker. He actually liked her, but she stalked him so much that one day while he was in the bathroom, she tried to seduce Sid by putting her breasts on his head. Sid turned her down, so she cut off a piece of his hair and said she would masturbate to it every time she looked at it. Sid finally gave in and said he'd go out with her if she really wanted him that bad. But the next week, she broke up with him because he had gotten a haircut, and she said she didn't have that stalker feeling about him anymore. One time, when Princess Proton's parents got drunk, her dad decided to take out the trash at 12 a.m. Her mom, also being drunk, followed him afterwards and shut the door, locking them out. They both realized what happened and started banging and yelling at the back door. Proton had headphones on and didn't hear anything. Suddenly, there was a bang on Proton's window. She opened it, and her dad climbed in from the roof. Her dad went to bed, and the next morning, he realized he forgot to let her mom back inside. They went to the back door and found her mom asleep outside on the grass. Lucky it was summer.
Dolan loves going to cosplay conventions, but his brother Zaragamba thinks they're really stupid. He's always making fun of Dolan for liking them. One year, Dolan got so sick of the teasing, he said,
Why don't you shut up, come to a convention with me so you can see what they're like?
Zaragamba agreed to go along, mostly so he could laugh at all the nerds. As a prank, he even dressed up as a hot anime babe just to show Dolan how dumb cosplayers were. But when they arrived, Zaragamba started getting lots of positive attention from the other cosplayers. Everywhere they went, people complimented his costume and said really nice things. Zaragamba realized he was wrong about cosplaying and discovered that he loved the attention he got from dressing up like a girl. The craziest thing Snoopy's ex ever did was on the first day of summer when he texted her, "Wanna go get dinner?" Snoopy told him he was busy, so he came to Snoopy's house with a mask on and said, "I will start a purge if you don't go to dinner with me, bitch!" Snoopy closed the door in his face and called 911. He got arrested later, not for threatening her, but for shoplifting. Turns out he stole the mask he was wearing when he came to her house. Probably should have started the purge before he stole the mask.
Sweet Commando was in the 4th grade. He told his class that the potato salad served in the lunchroom was made from the remains of nuclear disaster victims, which is why it looked very white and lumpy. He even made a whole story out of it. When the Soviet Union broke up, there were many dead radioactive bodies from disasters, and they were secretly sent to the United States and kept in an underground chamber. They were then processed to resemble potatoes and sent to schools all over the United States. This was believed to be true ever since, and being a substitute teacher last year, Sweet Commando felt guilty whenever someone said, "Pass the potatoes."
When he was 12, Spinal Palm's best friend Tolop told him how his sister broke her arm on Christmas Eve one year.
How did she break her arm?
Asked Spinal Palm. Tolop told him that his sister, who was 9 at the time, fell down the stairs and broke her right arm at the elbow. A week later, it was Christmas Eve, and Spinal Palm's 9-year-old sister fell down and broke her arm, also at the elbow. It turned out that she even went to the same doctor as Tolop's sister, and also got a pink cast. It also turned out that they were born during the same week of the same month. Weird.
Once Spinal Palm was waiting for his girlfriend to arrive so they could go out on a date. He was trying to think of a pickup line to make himself feel confident. He decided to pick,
Hey, did you fall from heaven? Because you look like an angel.
However, when the time came around and she arrived, Spinal Palm said,
Hey, are you an angel? Because you look like you fell from heaven.
Not only did he mess up the line, but he also said she looked like she fell from the sky. But 2 years later, they're still together.
Robo was sitting in a local park with some friends when a man with a large bag sat at a bench. She didn't pay him much attention until she glanced over and saw him pull a beer and a rabbit out of his bag. He put it on the grassy area behind him and stayed there with his beer for about 20 minutes. Then he put the rabbit back in the bag and walked away without saying a word to anyone.
Sid was hanging out with his friends at a bus stop. It was 2 a.m. and they were close to a large supermarket parking lot waiting for the bus because they didn't want to walk the mile back to his house. They had to wait a while, so Sid's friend walked off to go make out with his girlfriend in the bus stop's glass booth. It went on forever, so Sid threw a pebble at the glass to tell him to wrap it up. But when it hit the glass, the whole thing exploded and shattered. That was when Sid realized he hadn't thrown a pebble, but a brick. Sid's friend started screaming, and then all of a sudden, he saw red and blue flashing lights. There were cops just hanging out in the parking lot, watching the whole thing. They ran across the street, jumped a fence, and hid in some old man's bushes for a bit. After the cops drove off, they walked home after all. For a while in 8th grade, I took a boxing class at school. It was a lot of fun, and I got to do it with a bunch of my friends. One of them was a really cute girl. One day, just before we sparred, I was trying to find a way to ask this girl out, and basically I said if I could beat her in the sparring contest, that she should go out with me, and she agreed. So when we got in the ring, I didn't hold back. I went in arms flying. It was a very quick spar, and she was down on the ground, knocked out. The coach jumped in the ring, and instead of lifting my arm in the air, he went over to her. What's the deal with that? Anyway, long story short, she decided not to go out with me and reneged on our bet, which I think is poor form.
One day, Honeybits was chilling in her room when her phone rang. She glanced at her screen, saw a short name beginning with the letter M, and answered it, thinking it was her mom. But instead of a simple hello, Honeybits answered the phone by saying, "Hey Mom, did you get my tampons from the store yet?" There was a few seconds of silence on the other end, then a masculine voice said,
No.
That's when Honeybits realized that it was her crush calling. He was calling to invite her for a drive in his truck. Honeybits went for the drive, but she was so embarrassed she could barely look him in the eye the entire day.
Back when Tulip was in his goth phase, girls would come up to him without him having to make any effort. When he outgrew the whole goth thing, that stopped happening and he actually had to approach girls himself. Since he was so out of practice, Tulip always ended up being an awkward goofball. One time when he was at a friend's party, he ran into a girl, Princess, who was playing Final Fantasy III on the host Super Nintendo. She was fighting a boss called Ultros, who was a giant purple octopus. Tolop went up to her and said,
Ah, getting tentacled by Ultros, I see.
Spence replied, yeah? And just stared at Tolop for a second before he said,
Okay, I'll go over, there now. Bye!
Spinal Palm's weirdest secret is that sometimes, when he's bored, he likes to suck and chew the end of his shirt. Even if he knew that doing this would leave it completely covered in saliva, he did it regardless. One time, his grandma made hot dogs, and he ate 3. Afterwards, he started sucking his shirt, and he accidentally pulled it so far into his mouth that the shirt touched the back of his throat, and he vomited all over the room. The hot dog bits got everywhere, and he was forced to clean it up. Needless to say, he grew out of the habit that day.
One year, Emoji was so excited to find out what he was getting for Christmas that he snuck a peek while his parents were out. He very carefully unwrapped his gifts and discovered he hit the toy jackpot. When he was finished, he rewrapped them so they looked exactly how he'd found them. It was the perfect crime. On Christmas morning, Emoji tried not to give his secret away. He tore off the wrapping paper and found an empty box with a note in it. The note read, I know you peeked at your presents. Christmas is now canceled. Love, Santa. Sure enough, Emoji no longer got those awesome presents. Damn, Santa, you're cold. One night, when Derek was home alone, he decided to binge watch some of his favorite shows. A few hours in, he began to hear noises that sounded like yelling and banging. Of course, he went to investigate. When he looked out the window, he saw a grown man running down the street in a My Little Pony t-shirt, a tutu, and a tinfoil hat. The man banged on pots and pans while screaming, Love yourself! Be true to yourself! Some people in the neighborhood ended up calling the police, but instead of sticking around to see what happened, Derek decided to go to bed. However, he was still weirded out by the experience.
Nixium used to have a paralyzing fear that he would wake up in the middle of the night and see Satan himself standing next to his bed, just waiting to take him to hell for anything he felt slightly guilty about. His grandma was pretty religious and visited Nixium a lot, so it seemed like a perfectly rational fear to him at the time. He believed this until around 8 years old, when he stopped being religious after a few incidences which may or may not have involved his brother accidentally eating a fried worm.
When Melissa was a child, her older brothers used to tell her about an old man named Danny who lived nearby. Apparently, Danny brutally murdered his parents and now lives by himself. One day Melissa and her brothers were walking to school when they spotted Danny coming towards them. Her brothers told her not to panic, but she was too scared and hid in the bushes. When she thought he was gone, she left the bushes. But she was wrong and heard a loud growl behind her. She ran home crying. Many years later, when she was driving home, she looked out the window and saw Danny standing on the side of the road in the rain, staring directly at her. She sped home and never looked back.
This one time, Pringle was sitting on the train while looking out the window. Pringle wasn't really doing much, so his attention shifted to this one guy's phone conversation. The reason he was drawn to him, of all people, was because he was all sweaty, and he looked fucking bewildered. Like his eyes looked like that of a deer in headlights. Now, not long after, at the top of his lungs, the guy suddenly yells,
Dude, what the fuck did you give me? I've been seeing blue people for 3 goddamn days, you motherfucker.
At that point, all Pringle could do was laugh his balls off.
When I was little, my dad told me that if I put dirt into a sock and tied it up in a knot and threw it into the sky, I would catch fruit bats. I believed him, and I spent hours of every day for a month straight throwing socks in the air trying to catch bats. And that was probably a way to keep me occupied and out of my parents' hair.
When Spinal Palm was younger, he was walking home from a friend's house one night. It was just hitting dusk and almost all sunlight had disappeared. A streetlight above him had flickered off, and he started to hear footsteps behind him. Naturally, he turned around to see who it was. What he saw was a black hooded figure, but he couldn't make out a face because it was quite some distance away. He felt uneasy, but continued on. The closer he got to home though, the louder these footsteps got, almost as if they were coming from inside his head. He turned around once more to see the figure standing right behind him. He ran to his front door and slammed it shut. When he looked out the window to see the man, there was nothing to be found.
Dolan's brother has a dating story that began innocently enough with an agreement to meet for dinner. She seemed quite normal when they emailed each other, and gave no indication of madness to come. The date began normally with a meet and greet which commenced dinner. However, things went downhill from there. Within 2 minutes of meeting, she picked up the steak knife as they were eating at a steakhouse and told him that she heard voices. Then she took the steak knife and stabbed it into the wooden table repeatedly and twisted it. Dolan's brother began to have the sense that the date was already over. She had this strange little smile on her face as she twisted the knife into the table, and he told her that he forgot something in his car. She looked at him puzzled, saying,
"You're coming back, right?"
He smiled and reassured her,
"Yeah, of course I'm coming back."
and got the hell out of there like a bat out of hell. Would you have stayed for Miss Basic Instinct?
On Halloween, when Gergak was 13, his mom picked him up from school like she did every day, except this time, she was dressed up as a crazy cat lady. She had on pink paw print pajamas, fuzzy slippers with cat faces on them, pink cat-eye glasses, curlers in her hair, and was carrying a bunch of plush cats. She made a big deal of showing everybody her costume, and by the time they left, Gergak wanted to die. His friends would not let him forget it either.
One time, at Andy's school, two guys were talking shit to each other, with one threatening to beat the other one's ass. At lunch, they met again, with the one who had made a threat by picking up a lunch tray and bashing it over the head of the other guy, breaking the tray. The guy then slammed him to the floor and began punching him in the face. There was another crazy incident that happened, but was unrelated to this fight. On another day, during breakfast, the principal told everyone to go to class early. Andy didn't know what was going on until she noticed a girl who was foaming at the mouth, passed out on the floor. Paramedics showed up, and the principal rewarded everyone with gummy treats for obeying his orders.
One night, Dolan woke up super thirsty, so he went to the bathroom to fill up his cup with water. In the reflection of the mirror, he saw a black figure standing behind him, staring right at him. The light in the bathroom suddenly turned off and the figure was glowing in the dark. In a creepy voice, the figure said, "Come with me, we'll have fun forever." He put his hand on the mirror and suddenly he passed out. He woke up on the bathroom floor with the figure looking down at him before disappearing into thin air.
One of my favorite anime convention traditions is to get blackout drunk with all of my friends. Unfortunately, one time, that didn't happen the way it was supposed to. My best friend decided to ditch me for a girl, so I ended up extremely lonely and downing half of a bottle of wine, and I'm a lightweight, so that completely destroyed me. I was with some guy at the time that wasn't Jess. We were going through a rough patch, and I remember my best friend coming in, me getting angry at him, walking out the door, and when the guy I was with at the time didn't chase me, I got super fucking upset. So I ran down to the lobby of the hotel we were staying at, went outside, and just sat on a bench and cried. It was so embarrassing and so dramatic, and it was so pathetic, but I didn't realize it because I was really drunk. The next day, the guy I was with was so mad at me. I mean, I get I'm not your responsibility, but I was in the city of Tampa, and if I had wandered off into a alleyway or something bad could have happened to me. Tampa's not all that safe. But it was totally my fault. I'm an adult. I make my own decisions, as shitty as they are. I also remember going back up to the room and just crying in the bathroom for the rest of the night, so that was a thing too.
Once when Sidious was 10 years old, he was in the bathroom about to take a shower. Once he got naked, everything went pitch black. Apparently there was a blackout. He didn't want to shower in the dark, so rather than try and find his clothes, he felt his way to the door and left the bathroom totally naked. His dad and sister were in a nearby room looking for flashlights. None of them could see each other's silhouettes, and needless to say, everyone was pretty surprised when the lights abruptly came back, and Sidious forgot he wasn't wearing any clothes. But luckily he has a tail, so he can immediately hide all his private parts, because the tail is very bushy and you can't see it through it. I assume. I've never seen an animal person before, but I assume that's how it works.
About 3 to 4 years ago, Pringle had a minor speaking problem. He would sometimes say words out of order and swap syllables. His worst slip-up was when he was talking to a friend about his Pokemon while at McDonald's. What Pringle meant to say was,
"All I want is a game based in South America."
what came out was,
"All I want's a game based in South America."
His friend knew about his speech problem and asked him to repeat it. The second time, it came out as,
"All I want's a game based in South America."
Pringle got flustered because that was basically gibberish. The last time, before him and his friends just sat silently with their food, he said,
"All I want's a blame based in South America."
Pringle was about to say it one more time, but his friend stopped him and told him to breathe and think.
A while ago, I'd been seeing a girl for a little while. We'd been on a few dates, and inevitably the question came up of, whose house, my place or yours? Or it seemed inevitable to me. What I didn't realize was that at the time she was living out of her car. She was technically homeless. It turned out she'd just been in between jobs for a little while, and she didn't have a great support network. She told me crazy stuff like, 1 in 200 Australians is homeless. And it's not because necessarily they're drug addicts or alcoholics or crazy. It's just sometimes that's the way it happens. So it wasn't really a weird encounter per se. I just never thought I'd be dating a homeless person.
One time when Sid was around 12 years old, he was bored and decided to bounce around on the bed for some reason. But Sid, he wasn't jumping. He was bouncing while laying down with his hips flying into the air. He was even singing! Sid's dad came up, wondering what the commotion was. When he came in, he saw Sid, hips in the air, wearing no pants with his hands instinctively covering his crotch. He sat down beside Sid and started having the talk about when one has the urge to touch themselves. Sid interrupted him by saying, "I was just bouncing on the bed, Dad."
Snoopy was at home on her birthday. She was waiting for a boyfriend to come out of work and say happy birthday. He eventually texted her saying, "I love you." But then he replied saying, "Psych! I'm breaking up with you. Where's my stuff?" Snoopy replied, "It's on the stove. We ran out of charcoal." And she never texted him again.
Spinal Palm was 18 when he went to his first party and got wasted. During the party, he jumped on the sofa and pulled down his pants, showing everyone his member. He shouted, "Who wants to meet Johnny?" That was when Spinal Palm fell off the sofa, passed out. He woke up the next morning without any memory about what happened, until one of his friends told him.
Sid and his friends were hailing a taxi on the way home from a book signing one day. Suddenly, his friend poked him and pointed over at a homeless man. The guy was peeing, walking, and drinking an Arizona iced tea at the same time. Sid was moving away to get in the cab with his friends, but then he made brief eye contact with the man. The man gave him an intense stare that still haunts him to this day.
When Pringle was 7, his parents took him to California. While they were there, his parents had to go to a sales meeting, so they brought Pringle along. Pringle got so bored that he snuck off to explore the building. As he raced around a corner, he crashed into someone and fell over. He got up to apologize, but there was no one there. In fact, the entire corridor was empty. Just as Pringle was about to shrug it off, he felt something lift him by the shoulders. He turned and saw a middle-aged man with a blank stare and no facial features. When Pringle finally broke free, he ran straight to his parents to tell them what had happened. He took a long look around, but couldn't find the man. Security footage showed Pringle wandering around, but as soon as they got to his almost abduction, the footage mysteriously cut out. Pringle never found out what happened to him that day, but it was definitely a spooky way to start his Californian holiday.
The strangest rule at Slaptam's school is students' backpacks aren't allowed to weigh more than 3 pounds. Every morning, teachers will go around the school measuring every student's backpack. Apparently this is to stop students from bringing in anything dangerous like firearms. But for Slaptam, it meant carefully weighing every single thing he put in his bag to avoid getting detention. Whenever he had history class, he'd have to leave his lunch at home to fit his massive textbook.